non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab and the principal of Public Circle LLC, a research consultancy specializing in democracy, technology, and media. He is also a non-resident fellow at American University's Center for Security, Innovation, and New Technology. And he has previously held fellowships with Tech Policy, Press, and Propaganda Research Lab at UT Austin. In 2022, Mr. Jackson was in investigative analysis with the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, for which he helped lead inquiries into the role of social media platforms in the insurrection. That is so cool. He has previously held positions at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the National Endowment for Democracy, where he worked on disinformation and other technology-related challenges to democracy around the world. Mr. Jackson holds an MA in International Security from the University of Chicago and a BA from the Political Science in his native Dayton, Ohio. I used to live in Dayton. So Mr. Jackson will take your questions after the talk, just like we did here previously. So thank you, and let's have to give him a big hand.
All right, hello everybody, hello St. Paul's Church. I'm honored to be here speaking to you tonight. I'm a big fan of Indivisible, have been since the organization ramped up after the 2016 election. It's really important work, and I'm thrilled to see a full room of people here still doing it all those years later, although I wish you didn't have to be. I am here today, as you know, to talk about artificial intelligence. You've probably heard a couple things about it in the news. And if I'm successful tonight, I want to leave everybody here with three things. I want to give you all a baseline understanding of what artificial intelligence means, what we mean when we say AI. I want to give you a good grasp on how it's shifting who has power in our society and who doesn't. And I want to give you a sense of agency on how you as citizens can engage critically with artificial intelligence. But first I should answer a more fundamental question, which is who the heck am I? You just got my bio, so I won't go through this in depth, but I'm a writer and a researcher focused on technology, politics, and democratic accountability. I lived in DC for 10 years before moving to Lakewood with my wife, who grew up in Mayfield. As you just heard, I'm from Dayton, so we're both native Ohioans. I have a few other affiliations, most recently at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm a contributing editor for a site called Tech Policy Press. When I was in Washington, I worked on issues mostly related to social media disinformation and democracy. So, as a technology, AI has a lot of hype guys out there. Cleveland has a lot of events and organizations who are focused on promoting AI and entrepreneurship, AI and the workforce. And those are important topics, but they lend themselves to a lot of enthusiasm around the tech. On the other hand, if you go online, if you check social media or log into Blue Sky, you'll probably encounter a lot of people who are deeply cynical about the role of AI. And if I do my job here tonight, you'll leave here with a nuanced perspective somewhere between those two poles. So let's start at the beginning. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is all around us. You've probably been using it, or some form of it, longer than you suspect. It didn't start with ChatGPT. Your email spam filter uses some form of AI, almost certainly. AI determines what's at the top of your Facebook feed, and it's how Netflix knows what to show you, what you might watch next. A New York Times reporter recently tried an experiment where they tried to live their life with as little influence from artificial intelligence as possible, and they had to go out and buy new clothes, actually, because much of what they bought was somehow recommended to them or shipped to them through logistics systems that rely, at least in some part, on artificial intelligence. So imagine, I think they had to go to a thrift store or something. They had to walk down the street into a physical place to buy a used, can you imagine, in 2026? No, I've done it too, I know. What unites all these technologies, everything from Google search to facial recognition cameras? The answer is numbers. It's like encryption, like Megan told us, it's lots and lots of numbers. I once heard a joke that I'll repeat here now, please laugh at the end. If you want to make $100,000, go to college and get a degree in statistics. If you want to make $1 million, learn statistics and call it machine learning. If you want to make $1 billion, call it AI. At the most basic level, an AI system starts with data. That can be anything. It kind of depends on what you want the AI to do. If you want a system that recognizes faces, you need lots and lots and lots of pictures of faces. If you want a system that can write, you need hundreds of billions, if not more than 1 trillion words, at least. GPT-4, one of the models you can use on ChatGPT, was trained on as many as 10 trillion words. So what it means when you train data is you feed it into a model and you have it look for patterns in the data set. It learns bit by bit how to draw a face, how to predict what part of the face it should draw next. When it looks at words, it breaks those words down into chunks called tokens, because there's a few letters long, and then it will predict what tokens come next based on like what you've asked it to do and everything it knows about how language works. And I use the word knows loosely because, as we'll talk about, it doesn't really know anything, right? What it knows are patterns. The resulting model, after you've done that training, is a hugely complex set of patterns. It can have more than 1 trillion what they call parameters, which are these statistical relationships. Those parameters are all weighted by like how important of a relationship they seem to be. And then at the end, it spits out some kind of output. 2 other terms that you should know. The first, artificial general intelligence. Often you'll hear it just abbreviated to AGI. That's the sort of hypothetical future with the all-powerful supercomputer that puts us all out of work. We don't have that. We might never have that. I personally think it's a long way away, if it's even possible. I think people who say it's here in a few years are mostly in marketing.
My son calls it just a glorified autocomplete. He's a programmer.
I saw someone once said it only took 10 years and billions of dollars, but Microsoft made a calculator that's wrong sometimes. I don't want to downplay how useful these things are, because I actually use them for work and they're getting better, and there are really, I think, interesting use cases for them, but it's also not magic, right? And you do have to understand that. What we do have, and what we're mostly going to talk about tonight, is what's called generative AI. That's what has been making all of the news, right? That's what ChatGPT is. It's how you generate images using AI. These are systems that are really good at producing specific kinds of outputs from the patterns that learn. The best way I think I can explain the difference between the AI that powers your Facebook or your Netflix account and generative AI is, your spam filter looks at an email and asks, is this spam? Yes or no? It makes a determination. Generative AI reverses that. You say, write me a cover letter, show me a cat, show me a picture of a Lake Erie sunset, summarize this 50-page report, and from that input, it creates something based on the relationships it understands, as opposed to predicting whether or not the thing you've given it is a cover letter or not, or a cat or not. This is why these systems make funny mistakes sometimes, because if you ask them to write poetry, they don't really understand poetry, right? They don't know what poetry means. They have learned sets of patterns that look like poetry, and so they can spit something out that resembles that, but they don't have what you call like a model of the real world. And another funny story I'll tell is that a man recently asked an AI chatbot if he should drive a short distance to his oil change, or if he should walk there. If he should walk to his oil change. And the AI, of course, told him to walk because it would be healthier and more environmentally conscious. Once he prompted, like really, I'm going to walk to my oil change, it said, I didn't really focus on the part of the thing where you were getting an oil change. They don't understand physics or common sense, right? They're generating outputs based on incredibly large data sets of patterns. Another way of understanding this tech is by looking at the infrastructure that undergirds it. So most of the time when we go on the internet and we go to chatgpt.io or whatever, you load an app on your phone, you're at the end user, you're up there. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on under that before it gets to you. That includes the company that made the model you're using, all the data that went into it, the data center where that model was trained. Within that data center, these data centers, they're everywhere now. We'll talk a little bit about that. These are giant buildings that are full of computers with almost no people in them. Within that, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of computer processors, or microchips, chips. Those chips, most of the world's chips are made in Taiwan, so more than 90%, and they are made out of rare minerals like lithium, which are mined somewhere. And actually, there is a lot of thinking that when the president started talking about invading Greenland, part of the reason for that, other than ego and general madness, was because Greenland has a lot of critical minerals, and someone put a bug in his ear, right? Those could belong to the United States. We wouldn't have to import them from places like China or Angola or Canada, as it happens. So what do we, if we've dug up all these minerals, we've turned them into microchips, we've stuck them in a data center, we've trained a model on all this data we've collected, what do we do with it? What's it good for? Here are a few UAs people are using generative AI. Most of these rely on text. I tend to, I write a lot for my day job, so I'm probably biased in that direction, but it can involve images or audio or video content. And you can, one way I use it sometimes, I'll take a picture of a houseplant that's struggling, and I'll say, hey, what is this plant and why is it sad? And it'll come back and tell me, this is what type of plant it is. It likes this kind of light. You might consider this type of fertilizer. When's the last time you watered it? At a basic level, you can use it like Google search, right? Like just throw it a one-sentence question, it'll give you an answer. A more sophisticated way of using it, though, would be something, so like you might, for example, you could Google what's located at this address. A more sophisticated thing you might do with generative AI might be, here are 2 spreadsheets with addresses in them. Can you combine these spreadsheets, deduplicate them, right? No repeat addresses, and then alphabetize them for me? Even more sophisticated, and this is something you're starting to hear about with tools like Claude Code, Agentic AI, some of these more cutting-edge buzzwords. Take this spreadsheet of addresses and make a searchable website with a pleasing graphic interface for a specific user demographic, right? You can now, in like an hour or two, have something like that up and running with very little coding experience. I've made a couple of Chrome extensions to do basic things for myself, and the extent of my coding experience is really updating the HTML on my MySpace in 2005. So now, we could end the conversation there, right? I could tell you, like, this is how it works. Here's some cool things you've done with it. Thank you for subscribing to ChatGPT Pro. We're not going to do that. You've probably all heard about various things that can go wrong, ways in which this technology introduces risks to our society, to our democracy, ways in which it can harm people. So let's talk about that. Let's start with the environmental footprint. Remember the AI supply chain we talked about? That starts with minerals. All the mining of those minerals comes with a cost. This photo here is a mock-up Meta produced of a data center they are building outside of Bowling Green, Ohio, not too far from here. It's a massive hyperscale data center that will be used for training some of their most cutting-edge models. These facilities require enormous amounts of electricity, and you've probably all heard about that. But Mark Zuckerberg just negotiated to purchase all of the electric power from the 2 nuclear plants that were bailed out under HB6. 2 nuclear plants just to fuel his AI data centers in Ohio, right? It's not uncommon for these facilities to have their own on-site dedicated natural gas power plants. And in Hilliard, outside of Columbus, they're actually building a fuel cell enrichment center that is the biggest in North America. And I think maybe the 3rd biggest in the world. The other 2 are in South Korea. I mean, it is a tremendous amount of power that these require. No wonder everyone's utility bills are going up. It's also a lot of carbon in the atmosphere, right? Because especially in Ohio, if you need a lot of power, that means often a lot of natural gas. They are not waiting around for an amount of green energy on the grid to catch up to their needs. Let's just put it that way. It's also a lot of air pollution. By 2030, I think, it's expected that the US could be paying as much as $2 billion just from the respiratory effects of all of the pollutants that these facilities will generate. They also use a lot of water to cool the equipment inside. It depends on exactly how the equipment's cooled to tell you how much water, and often it'll vary by region. Arizona's hotter than Ohio. It'll vary by, as I said, the system that's in there. It's often also considered a trade secret, so we don't exactly know. But sometimes when people do find out, they can use as much water as entire towns. Newer facilities will use less because they are exploring what's called closed loop cooling, where they reuse the water. Literally, the old way of doing it was the heat from the computer chips would be transferred to a piece of metal outside and they would spray it down with a hose. Incredibly inefficient. Closed loop cooling is more efficient, but the downside is you've got to discharge that wastewater, and now it's full of forever chemicals, right? It's full of plastics. And the Ohio EPA, our friends in Columbus, are actually considering a fast-track permitting system to allow that wastewater to be discharged right back into our lakes and rivers. Yeah, Ohio EP is a little bit of a misnomer.
Every polluter's ally.
There you go. That's, yeah. I like that. Is that on a t-shirt anywhere? Every polluter's ally. EPA. Let's talk about other issues. Consider the way that this can play out in the workplace, right? AI systems are being trained on data that comes from the real world. As we know, the real world is a biased place. There's a lot of discrimination. That means that when companies do things like use AI in their hiring processes, they may unknowingly even be discriminating against women, people of color, other minorities, older people. People might have no idea. The applicants themselves may have no idea that AI has had such a consequential impact on their life for reasons that are deeply unfair. Another issue is that the training data from these systems often comes from artists and writers who are mostly uncompensated, right? There was recently a revelation that Anthropic had bought and scanned and in the scanning process destroyed, because it's faster to take a book apart and scan it than it is to flip the pages. Thousands and thousands of books. And this was actually the more ethical way of doing it, because at least they bought the books, right? OpenAI didn't even buy the books. That's a big problem. There's a lot of anger around this because these systems are now replacing working writers and artists on whose work the systems were trained. You can imagine why that galls some people. AI is also affecting hiring in industries like software development, kind of ironically, right? But it's really good at code. It makes sense. It's coding as a sort of logical structure, and it doesn't need to be poetry, right? It doesn't mean there's no value add if you're a senior web developer who's been doing it for a long time, but the consensus kind of within companies like Microsoft is a senior guy using artificial intelligence is more productive than a team of junior guys, right? And so there are fewer job openings for software developers. What if that spreads to other sectors? Big problem. Also risks to our democracy and our civics. AI bias problem also applies in government. AI systems are being used for things like determining who gets parole and for how long. ICE is also using AI to identify targets for immigration raids. And this screenshot is from Tech Policy Press, where I mentioned I have a part-time role as an editor. This is from what they call the AI use cases from the Department of Homeland Security. So an interesting rule that passed during the Biden administration and the Trump administration has kept doing, at least for now, is telling us, like, hey, we acquired these systems, here's how we're using them. If it's super secret or sensitive, they may obscure some of it, but it's interesting data. And so this dashboard tells you what the use cases they listed last year, how many have been deployed already, and by which agency within DHS. And you can see the largest, sorry, the font is quite small, the largest are CBP and ICE. They're using these for things like there's a tool that I believe Palantir helped develop called Elite, which they use to generate, they use it to determine where they're going to target immigration raids. It combines a bunch of spreadsheets that exist all over the government, but puts them in one place, and then an ICE agent can look at a map, draw a circle on it, and it will tell them where in that circle the highest cluster of possible targets for deportation are likely to be. So the idea, it's not telling the government anything new, but it is reducing the number of minutes each ICE agent has to spend arresting someone and deporting them. I think that's bad. You probably do too, but this is one way in which artificial intelligence is really superpowering the police and surveillance state that we're living under. It's not exactly new, but it's certainly being ratcheted up to new levels under this administration. Another civic risk I want to talk about is the hollowing out of local journalism, which is already a severe problem. It's been a problem for decades. Some of you may have seen that Chris Quinn, who edits Cleveland.com, recently wrote a piece about how Cleveland.com is using AI in its newsroom, and that got a lot of attention online. I think mostly negative, but probably some positive. I don't really fault Chris Quinn for trying to innovate, and the plain dealer shutdown hurt everybody in Cleveland pretty badly, I think, so he has reason to sort of want to move quickly and lightly and be more efficient wherever he can. The problem is, I think many journalists will tell you that writing is really a form of organized thinking, and when they report a story, the process of writing it makes them better journalists. It makes their coverage better. And so what do we lose? There are probably certain types of stories that are pretty pro forma. You can do them quickly. AI can probably do those. What do we lose, though, if we start losing writing as a part of journalism? I do worry about that, and it's not something, I think, to be given away lightly. What about risks to users of AI systems themselves? Some users find themselves relying on AI more and more. If you use a large language model like ChatGPT, chatbot, really often, you may notice that they often end their responses in a question. They use a sort of suck-up tone. Who doesn't like talking to people who are really interested in them and think they're great and right all the time? This is because most of these systems are designed to keep you using them, right? They want you to stay engaged, and we're all simply seeing that dynamic before, right? It's the same sort of rationale behind most social media sites. It's only going to get worse now that ChatGPT and a few other services have rolled out ads on their free tiers, right? They have an incentive to keep you using it so they can show you more ads. This gets really dangerous for people who are really lonely, or people with dementia, or people with mental health who find themselves leaning on these chatbots for emotional support. There was an older man in New Jersey, a retired man, who was convinced that the chatbot was a young woman who was in love with him, and he went into New York City to meet up with her. His wife had no idea, and he passed away, unfortunately. It's a very sad story. There are active lawsuits right now about teenagers who have committed suicide because they were deeply depressed and developed relationships, they thought, with these chatbots, and the chatbots, encouraged them to harm themselves. So, if you have kids who are interested in this stuff, certainly monitor what they're doing, because you can't rely on the companies to provide any kind of safety or guardrails. These models are also being used to perpetrate more convincing cyber scams, right? If you can fake audio, you can fake imagery, it's really easy to trick people into thinking their loved ones are calling and asking for money. Emails start to get better, they're not so obvious or easy to spot anymore. There's also the issue of non-consensual intimate imagery. You might have heard of these as like deep fake nudes. There are applications that can sort of digitally undress someone to make a fake nude image of them. Used to take hours and hours and some skill in Photoshop to do that. Now school children are literally doing it. It's a crime in most places, and there's a law currently on the books that won't go into effect until May, but will make it easier for women to request those images be taken down. But once something's out there on the internet, if it spreads to more than one site, it becomes a game of whack-a-mole to try to get that removed. So how it will work in practice is yet to be seen, but I don't think anyone expects it to fully solve that problem. It's going to take a lot of, I think, educating young men about consent in AI and digital sexual assault before that rates of that type of crime begin to go down. It'll also mean probably some of these companies need to accept accountability for it and put in place better guardrails, but it's a huge problem. So what do we do about all this? I want to be practical here. I don't want to, I'm not going to leave and just scare you and give you nothing to do about it. I want to leave you with a sense of agency on how you can protect yourselves and your community. You're not powerless, and you don't have to be afraid. Protecting yourself. Remember that AI can get things wrong. Sometimes those things are high stakes, right? If they involve like your health or major home renovations, financial decisions. And so the same as you should be doing on social media, right? Like, check your sources. Do a little more digging and research. Ask people you trust. Sometimes in academic literature, they call this reading laterally, right? Instead of reading down and going deeper into the source and engaging with it, go check another site, If you're not sure that this this Facebook page you're on is legit. Go see if anyone else has reported the story. If ChatGPT tells you something that would be disastrous if it's wrong, or if it just seems weird, go check a source you trust. See if you can gather a little more information. It's very basic advice, but we're all really busy and we don't always take the time to do it. But it's the best way to protect yourself from, relying on bad information. Also, verify before you share. Right? Don't mislead others who trust and believe you into doing something that they shouldn't. So for scams, in addition to a lot of the cybersecurity tips you got from Megan, I would say be skeptical of urgency, right? If someone wants you to do something right now, that's a good sign that you should be slowing down and asking questions. The same as you would with like a salesman, right? And then finally, a lot of people don't realize that when you engage with an AI chatbot online, the information you give it is being stored and used to train future versions of that chatbot. And sometimes it can even regurgitate people's personal information. There was a woman who did online sex work under an alias whose real name was leaked by an AI chatbot, and she was doxxed on X, and caused her quite a bit of headache and should not have happened. But don't trust that what you tell it will stay between you and ChatGPT. It is not a good confidant. And for the larger societal questions, what can we do as citizens? The data center issue is huge right now in Ohio. Columbus is one of the largest hotspots for data center development in the world. And it's starting to become so saturated there that it's spreading to other parts of the state. And there have been, I think, dozens of moratoriums in municipalities around the state where people have said, let's hit pause on this. We want to understand this issue better before we welcome such a large and energy and water hungry facility into our town. The thing about these centers is they often receive also really generous tax abatements from the state legislature, as well as also from county governments. They get sales tax abatement from the state, property tax abatement from county government, sometimes up to 100% for 30 years. So that's money out of social services and schools that are going to infrastructure for big tech. We don't have so many of these in Cuyahoga County because we don't have a lot of like greenfield space to build new stuff on. They don't want to have to tear something down or renovate the land to build one of these. They just want to, throw it up in a couple months. But they don't even really produce that many jobs after construction. The construction boom is big, but between 10 and 100 people, depending on the size of the data center, for quite a lot of investment and quite a lot of tax revenue forgone. We don't really have to be doing that. Economic development scholars say that probably we are giving away way too much, and this is actually a divisive issue in the State House right now. Last year, the Ohio State Legislature, believe it or not, voted to repeal the state sales tax abatement, and Mike DeWine vetoed it. But they're going to try again, and it may be possible that there will be a deal between the Republican legislature and a Republican governor. This is a time where you can raise your voice and actually move them. I know often it feels impossible to get your voice heard in Columbus, but this is an issue where there's daylight between the legislature and the governor. I also find it really hard to believe it's not going to be an issue in the gubernatorial race. With Vivek Ramaswamy and his previous statements on AI and his relationship to the industry, I think he's going to be all in on data centers, which means there's a real opening for Amy Acton to make this an issue. People in ruby red counties and in very blue suburbs are all peeved about this. And so it could be a real unifying issue and a real winning issue in the election. Another thing you can do, vote with your wallet. Support human-made content. It's weird that we have to maybe apply that label to some things now, but support artists who you care about, whose work you like. Support writers, support journalists who cover these issues. I'm not saying that self-servingly, but go out and give to groups like Signal Cleveland who do local news coverage, because there's a real risk that AI eats into their profit margins. They do this work on already pretty thin resources, so they could use your support. And finally, I want to just end by giving you a sort of simple framework for how you can use this technology, since it is so hard on the environment and it does pose so many risks to democracy and our way of life. Should we use it at all? And I tend to think of this as like an instrumental relationship, right? Like the same one that I have with my car, which I don't want to be as car reliant as I am. It's bad for the environment. I like public transit generally, living in DC for 10 years. Most of those 10 years I didn't own a car. Now I live in Cleveland, I do. The answer isn't, to forgo cars and never leave the 3 square miles around my house, right? It's to use them consciously and try to minimize the environmental harm while gaining the benefits. Imagine the way using some of these tools could power the activism of a group like Indivisible, right? Things that you used to have to enter into spreadsheets by hand, maybe you don't anymore. There are probably other ways you could make your activism more effective and efficient and harder punching with these tools. And that might be worth it. That might be, if these tools are going to exist, and right now they do, why not use them to fight a data center, right? Another thing you can do, practice what, I'm going to lift this term from someone else, but practice what I call media temperance, sort of ration your use of the technology, be intentional about how much of your attention you give it. Social media companies, artificial intelligence companies, often the same companies, they want your attention, right? It's an attention economy. That's the thing they're after. So be careful how much of it you give away from them. Just be intentional about your tech use and media diet. I think the questions to ask when you engage with AI is, does it help you do something you couldn't have done before? Does it give you a genuinely new capability? Or does it help you do something you were doing before but much faster so you can do other things? Is it replacing a person? Would you have done this thing if you were doing something, if you were going to say write a song? Would you have hired a musician and now are you using AI? I think that's probably bad. If you weren't going to write the song before and you're dabbling in some kind of art project that needs a tune and you were never going to have the budget to hire someone, maybe less bad, right? But think ethically about the way you're using the tool. And finally, there are some things for which there just aren't shortcuts. Knowing something, knowing the answer to a question isn't the same as learning. We don't give kids the answer keys to their math tests because knowing 5 plus 5 is 10 isn't the same as knowing how to do addition. And so, as you engage with these tools, and you see other places engage with them, you see them integrated into schools, think about, are they encouraging learning? Are they encouraging thinking? Or are they just shortcuts? I have talked enough. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm happy to take your questions. If you want to learn more about me or my work, there is a QR code here. In general, it is terrible cybersecurity practice to scan QR codes from strangers, but I promise I'm trustworthy. Remember when they showed all those QR codes during the Super Bowl and millions of people scanned them with their phones? Cybersecurity experts were horrified. This one just takes you to my personal website where you can see a little bit more of my work. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson. I appreciate that. Boy, did I learn a lot. So who's got the first question? Okay.
On the question of what you can do, I get a lot of emails from a group called Control AI, and I've been signing petitions and things like that. They're particularly against super intelligence. Have you heard of them?
I don't. Didn't want to leave. I don't think I've heard of them specifically. It's interesting that they're against superintelligence because the things I tend to see in the AI advocacy space are there are a lot of groups that popped up with industry money that are advocating for and this might be one of them. If you can find out where they get their funding from, it'd be worth looking into. But that are advocating against they call existential risks to humanity, right? They're talking. People sometimes call them AI doomers. These are the will the artificial intelligence take over our government and start a nuclear war? And I think, I'm not saying they don't truly believe that. What I'm saying is focusing on those risks, which are very hypothetical, distracts from focusing on risks that are more immediately in front of us, and sort of assumes that this technology is very powerful, which if you work in tech is a helpful thing for people in government to believe. And so you do have to have some skepticism. This group could be great. I don't know them specifically, but look into who, if you can, who's on their board, who funds them, what kind of relationships they have, because there are a lot of groups like that out there.
The picture that you showed of the data center with all those enormous flat roofs, why aren't they putting on solar?
It's a drop in the bucket around what it needs, but it is something.
I don't know, it's a good question. One reason could be that it's hard to get permits for large-scale solar products in Ohio. Any municipality or county can sort of throw up an objection and get those not built. I think that what they want at the end of the day is the power. I don't think there's a reason they're not doing it, and it's probably either because of permitting, which I just mentioned. Sometimes I think like Meta has actually started building like essentially very large industrial strength tents. Sometimes they want these built up fast, and so maybe the structural support of the roof can't support it. I don't know. It's a good point. They should be doing that.
It's not going to be enough.
And it also could not be.
I mean, if you need 2 nuclear power plants, that's going to be a drop in the bucket.
And you know what?
Wouldn't hurt.
Would be good PR for them.
It'd be great PR for them, and then they could link it to the power grid and
A lot.
and help support. They could subsidize the improvement of our power grid, and the greenification of our power grid, which would be a really
They
nice thing.
probably have enough clout to change the attitude of the legislature.
Yes.
It's interesting because you have these sort of two titans, right? You have big tech, and then you have natural gas. They both have a lot of money, and our legislature really wants to listen to both of them. And they're fighting it out in courts right now. There's actually a lawsuit between Amazon and I think it's AES, the power distributor for Central and Southern Ohio, to determine whether or not they can charge them a higher rate to produce infrastructure. So it's a real battle between the lobbyists.
I feel like I'm having some problem determining what's true in the news and online. What do you read locally? What do you watch on TV? Where do you get your news? Who do you trust?
So I read Signal Cleveland. I do read Cleveland.com. I live in Lakewood. So sometimes I read the Lakewood Observer, although that's more of a blog, like any citizen can write to it, but that has its own value. You learn things you wouldn't other places. I don't watch a lot of TV news, to be honest. It's the density of information you can put into print is greater than what you can get on TV, and TV tends to be like very spectacle driven, I find, and so it's not my preferred medium. Nationally, I kind of read everything. I mean, I do read, I read the New York Times, but I also read, for this kind of stuff, there's a great site other than Tech Policy Press, which...
CEO of New York Times is in the Epstein files.
Who's not at this point? I'm not.
Also, Ohio Capital Journal.
Ohio Capital Journal's great. They do great coverage on these things. There's a site called 404 Media for tech stuff that's really good. But yeah, I can't stress enough, like there are so many news sources out there that, find those big ones you trust who are going to report on things so you can verify it. And also, if it's really important to you, ask, and definitely ask before you share.
I
kind of have two questions. Like, I have used AI to check to see if something was written with AI. Is that, or, I mean, it'll tell me. I mean,
hit or miss.
It's hit or miss. For example, I think that Google claims that it can detect things that were made with Gemini, its own system, but it is also, if you wanted, you could have Gemini write you something, go in, move some commas around, add some paragraph splices, delete an em dash. It would be really, really easy to modify it slightly without changing the meaning, and then break that in that detection system.
which my other question is it, how do you know, I know that Gronk is an, and I remember the story where Twitter users were angry that all of a sudden AI was telling, when they were bringing over the white Afrikaners, that AI was telling people that there is no war going on and that they don't need to be here. And Twitter users got mad, and all of a sudden, the Twitter users were raising a stink about it, and all of a sudden Gronk started telling you, well, you know that people are suffering. Like, it kind of changed its tune. So is it only as, I mean, it's only as reliable as who's feeding it, and if Musk is feeding Gronk.
Yeah, there are a couple things that could be going on there, and Grok has had all these problems. One is AI systems can have what's called a knowledge cutoff, right? Like, the data only includes up to a certain date, and they can update that. But sometimes, like, if you ask any of them about something that happened today, it's actually really funny. People something crazy would happen. The Pete Hegseth chat scandal would break, and someone would be like, that same day, hey, did Pete Hegseth really add the editor of The Atlantic to a group chat? And the AI system, because it doesn't know, and because it's such an outrageous thing to happen, would say, there's no way that would happen. There are all these reasons it would be, you know. So that's possibly. The other thing that could have happened is, usually if you use one of these systems on like a chatbot in your web browser, what happens is you give it a prompt, you say something to it, and then the system adds something to that called a system prompt, which are like the secret instructions where it's like, hey, if this person asks you to like, how to do terrorism, don't tell them, right? Just don't answer that question. You know, it's their secret instructions to sort of keep things on rails. And Grok's system instructions could have been changed, and Elon Musk has messed with those. So it also matters who owns these
I
things.
was gonna say there's no law against that either.
It's his, yeah. It would be his. You know, the courts would probably say it's his First Amendment right to do that. He has an editorial right. I think it makes it a dangerous system to have and a dangerous system to rely on. But yeah, they would probably treat it like a newspaper.
At the time.
Laws. Is there any organizations you would suggest that we follow that are working on suggested legislation, like good, responsible legislation?
Yeah, there's a great group called AI Now that's worth looking up. There's also the Center for Democracy and Technology in DC. I've done some work with them, and I like the team there. Free Press is a good organization. They do, yeah, it's called Free Press, not the Free Press, which is the Barry Weiss newspaper, just Free Press, which is an advocacy group. Surprise. I'll leave you with those three, but certainly that would be a good start.
What was the rest of the Center for Democracy
And Technology, CDT.
So a lot of companies were previously making tools and products for people to use. Microsoft made Excel and things like that. And now it seems like they've gone totally in on AI. Do you think that's going to have like, are they trying to like outrun the bubble or something? And is this sustainable? I mean, sacrificing your core business for all of this?
So there's so much money in this, and it's pouring in so fast that I think there is a bubble. The question is more like, it's like musical chairs. Like when the music stops, who's not going to have a seat? I do think that there's, what companies like Microsoft are counting on is sort of, I think, the business-to-business case, right? That they can get enough other businesses using these tools that it's, the revenue model becomes sustainable. But like companies like AI don't turn a profit yet. They're going to do an IPO later this year, and we'll see how much investment they bring in. But it's really expensive. It takes a lot of electricity to train these models, and the chips themselves are very expensive. Every time you ask ChatGPT a question, Sam Altman loses money right now, right? But if they can get a big enough user base and get it efficient enough and get enough businesses using it, if companies decide that they can do things like replace their call center employees with an AI chatbot that can talk, which is already a thing that you can do, and I've heard stories of companies deciding to go that route, or if companies decide that they can no longer have to outsource to software development teams, but just have one guy make something in-house, there becomes a business case for it. The question is sort of, do do the companies that train the models end up losing money? Do the real estate developers who buy up all these land sites to make data centers, if that stops, do they end up with a bunch of leases they can't sell for data center sites? Is it the chip makers? Would there be a government bailout, in which case we would be on the hook as taxpayers? I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, it's a big open question. If I knew, like, if I had like a really good definitive answer and I was really confident I was right, I wouldn't have driven here in a Toyota RAV4.
I've researched that one quite a bit, man, but I can hold it. Oh, jeez. Okay, fine.
Go. Yes.
Okay, so I researched this quite a bit about an AI bubble bursting. Currently, as of like a month or two ago, still about 95% of companies that are investing in AI have no clue what they're doing. A lot of companies are investing in it. They're borrowing at today's higher interest rates, relatively speaking. That we don't have the energy infrastructure, we don't have the water supply needed. So it's going to be similar to the AI bubble, like back, like
The dot-com bubble.
Yes, the dot-com bubble. A lot of companies were investing, people were buying up domains. It doesn't mean the dot-com era wasn't coming. It just people didn't know what they were doing and they were overhyping it. So it is going to crash. I'm a firm believer. I've actually used AI to have a long conversation about potential economic crash. When I first asked it, it said, elevated 30-35%. Then I gave it about 100 different questions. Did you anticipate this? Did you anticipate that? It kept growing and growing. In the beginning of December, I got to about the 78% mark. And as I kept feeding more questions, it just might go up a point, might go up down a point, but it basically solidified. So I was pretty confident that I had already fed it bond markets, precious metals, alternate currencies, Bitcoin, job markets, everything. The latest numbers are pretty terrifying.
There was a...
It's up to about 98% in the next 18 months.
There was a good essay I read about the dot-com era and comparing it to the current AI investment boom. And a point they made was a lot of that, the people who lost their shirts in the dot-com era were people who invested in fiber optic cables, right? They built all this fiber optic cable because they thought that web traffic would double every year forever. And of course it didn't. Eventually you saturate, right? Like everybody's got an internet connection that wants one. And there's just not that much more room to grow. So all those people turned out lost a lot of money. But then we used the fiber optic cable. We found a use for it and the dot-com era did come. The problem, some of these data centers may end up not being repurposable, like the ones that are really big and like the one in Bowling Green. If the AI bursts and Meta doesn't have the money to train those models or walks away from the business or whatever, that one could end up standing empty. The ones that will probably persist are the ones that are in Columbus because the data centers where like your user inquiry is processed and returned to you, as opposed to where they train the stuff, those need to be closer to you, or else like it takes time to get stuff back and forth. And I think like we'll keep using this technology. The models are already developed, and there will be use cases for it. The question is, will it keep growing at the same pace, and what's the fallout when it doesn't? What happens to all of our retirement accounts?
So I would just add to that question, there's a very rich literature about the funding of AI, the funding of the data centers, and you may just want to put in Ponzi scheme. It's a huge financial pyramid that could collapse very easily because the profits are not going to be there, and it's just money that is circulating from one company, counted at revenue here and expense there, but that's not my question. My question is, what's going on with the Department of Defense and Anthropic? I just have seen the headlines, I'm trying to grasp it.
Yes.
It seems fundamentally important. What can you tell us about that?
So, Anthropic was, I think, the first model that the Department of Defense sort of authorized to be used in military planning. Anthropic's model is called Claude. It's the one I use. It's best to get a subscription because there's a really low usage limit. It's $20 a month, but they've promised never to use ads, and now they're in a fight with the Pentagon. So if there's a not a good AI company, but a better AI company. It's Anthropic. What happened is Anthropic caught wind that maybe their model was used for the military operation in Venezuela when Nicolas Maduro was captured by US forces. And that made them really uncomfortable. Their roots are really, they were started by members of the safety team at OpenAI who thought OpenAI was not being as safe as they wanted them to. And so, and you know, they're a private company. They do a lot of, they make a lot of compromises to attract investment and turn a profit. I'm not trying to say they're angels, but they were really uncomfortable with this idea that their systems would be used for operations that you know, might autonomously take human life, or you know, no human would be in the loop on that, or that they might be used for domestic mass surveillance. And they thought that there was a really high risk DoD was using them for both of those things. And they said, hey, this violates our agreement with you. We'd really like you to not do that. And Pete Hegseth said, we're not going to let a private company dictate how the US government uses this technology. And Anthropic said, well, it's our technology. And then he said, I'm going to designate you a supply chain risk, which would mean that no DoD contractor can do business with you. Now that's a real escalation, right? Because they're saying, like, not just like we're going to find another vendor, we're going to make sure nobody can do business with you. And this is really important because the future of warfare is automated, right? Like if you look at the battlefield in Ukraine, that fighting's being done mostly with drones. I mean, there are guys on the ground dying, don't get me wrong, but like that's been the big innovation, is that the Ukrainians can go blow up oil refineries with a $200 drone. And we have right now in the Persian Gulf naval drones that could be, you know, they could be given instructions to autonomously go blow up a ship. The military says that they don't currently do that, but imagine how risky it would be if the AI made a mistake, and you're no longer in control of the escalation process. But it also matters how fast you are in warfare, right? Kinetic warfare is about speed. Who attacks first? Who hits first? And so if in the future both sides have these drones, there's going to be an incentive to take those safeguards off, and Anthropic was worried about that. Now what's happened is OpenAI has sort of swooped in and I think secured a deal with like kind of meaningless safeguards to give Pete Hegseth what he wants. Anthropic gets a lot of good PR, but they've lost a lot of money. But it is fundamentally important because what the US government is essentially saying is we don't believe that there should be safeguards on this technology, or if there are, we should decide when they're on or off. And what Anthropic is saying is that's too important of a decision to be made so rashly by Pete Hegseth.
We are at the end of our evening. It is 8:30 and that's our bewitching hour. I thank our speakers tonight, Ms. Megan Lees, sitting in the back,